Somewhere, a short and boring ad is live on an underground forum. North America, manufacturing, 5 to 10,000 endpoints. Domain admin, virtual private network, VPN, available. Endpoint detection and response, EDR, present. It lists a revenue band, maybe cyber insurance status, and a starting bid that would not cover a single day of your internal red team. It does not mention your company name, your brand, or the story you tell about resilience. It is a simple promise that for a modest sum, someone can walk straight into a live corporate environment tonight. Behind that listing sits an initial access broker, IAB, whose entire job is to turn footholds into tradable assets. This is the Access Broker Auction House, and this Wednesday headline feature from Bare Metal Cyber magazine, developed by Bare Metal Cyber, stays with that scene rather than any single tool or headline.
The person posting that listing is not a headline-grabbing ransomware crew or an espionage team. The broker is a specialist in inventory. They collect working ways in, clean them up just enough to be reliable, and then sell them on to whoever wants to monetize the access. Those buyers may be data theft groups, ransomware operators, or more patient intrusion sets, but they all start from the same premise. Someone else has done the hard, noisy part of getting in. For the broker, your environment is not unique. It is one more entry in a catalog with fields like industry, geography, size, and access type. Every design choice you make that creates clear, durable entry points quietly improves that catalog entry.
Reading one of these listings tells you a lot about how your environment is seen from the outside. A broker might describe U.S. healthcare, 8,000 users, Active Directory, AD, EDR deployed, VPN and remote desktop, backups online, cyber insurance present. Industry and region hint at regulatory pressure and likely willingness to pay. Revenue and user count imply how much disruption will cost. Access type reveals what kind of playbook a buyer can run without much additional work. A note that multi-factor authentication, MFA, is missing on administrator accounts, or that an existing tool like EDR has been bypassed, reads like a reassuring feature in that world, not a bug. The entire story of your security program collapses into a few lines that answer one question. Can someone log in, move laterally, and get paid?
That compression is harsh, but it is useful. Inside your own organization, conversations tend to revolve around roadmaps, improvement programs, and last quarter's wins. Inside the auction house, only a handful of attributes matter. From a leader's perspective, that turns the listing into a diagnostic tool. The exercise of writing the broker's ad for your own company forces concrete thinking about how outsiders view your architecture, identity habits, and governance. It exposes which access paths are simple enough to capture in a sentence, and which long-forgotten decisions created footholds that now look like clean product on a shelf.
The access catalog does not appear out of nowhere. The upstream supply is noisy and messy, phishing that lands on random endpoints, password spraying against exposed VPN portals, cheap scans for old web vulnerabilities, and opportunistic hits on misconfigured cloud resources. A lot of that activity comes from commodity intruders and automated tooling rather than from polished crews. When something works, the first operator proves that they can authenticate, maybe drops a basic implant or remote management utility, and then looks for a way to pass the opportunity up the food chain. The broker steps in at that point, treating the foothold as raw material rather than a finished product. Turning that raw material into inventory is where your internal design choices start to shape the outcome. A broker will test how stable the access really is, map out privileges, and get a feel for your defensive posture. A flat internal network turns a single machine into a launchpad. Long-lived local administrator passwords and shared accounts help them persist without much creativity. Broad groups inside AD and sprawling service identities create simple paths to critical systems. In contrast, tight scoping of rights, frequent credential rotation, and high-friction lateral movement
all make the same foothold harder to turn into a neat listing. The broker wants a repeatable product, not a bespoke project.
Identity and governance patterns are just as important as technical layout. In many organizations, dormant accounts linger long after people or vendors leave. Shared administrator credentials outlive the teams that created them. Service accounts accumulate permissions as applications evolve, but rarely lose anything. That accumulation is identity debt, and it translates almost directly into value for a broker. A credential that works today and is likely to work 3 months from now is far more attractive than one tied to a short project or a tightly enforced role. Slow offboarding, vague ownership of third-party access, and one-way migrations that leave legacy systems half-retired all enrich the auction house without any new exploit. On the buyer side, the economics are simple. The first filter is industry and size. A regional hospital, a cloud-native software-as-a-service (SaaS) provider, and a global manufacturer each come with different assumptions about ransom appetite, data resale potential, and regulatory leverage. The next filter is type of access. Domain administrator in AD, management console access to a major cloud platform, or remote desktop into a central jump host fetches more than a single low-privilege workstation. Buyers read notes about EDR and MFA not in terms of compliance, but in terms of operational risk. EDR present, tuned but currently bypassed, signals that the seller has already done some groundwork, while no MFA on finance administrators implies a faster path to cash.
Durability might be the most critical factor of all. A short-lived token with predictable rotation and strong logging has limited resale value. A forgotten contractor account with broad rights and no clear owner looks like a long-term subscription. The same goes for legacy VPN concentrators, merger and acquisition environments left in temporary trust mode for years, and remote access solutions that have outlived their original projects. When your internal processes allow access to linger, the broker can confidently advertise that a foothold will survive routine hygiene. That confidence shows up as a higher price because it lowers the buyer's risk that the access will vanish halfway through their campaign.
Offense evolves, but the continuing strength of the access broker market says as much about defensive behavior as it does about attacker ingenuity. The patterns that feed the auction house rarely come from dramatic failures. They grow from reasonable trade-offs: shipping a project quickly, keeping a vendor online during a critical quarter, accepting a flat segment for a migration with the promise of cleaning it up later. Each decision makes sense in context. Over years, they stack into an estate full of long-lived, broadly scoped, poorly understood access that feels safe inside the business and looks like premium inventory outside it.
Organizational structure reinforces that dynamic. Ownership for remote access, vendor connectivity, identity platforms, and segmentation is often split across infrastructure, cloud, security operations, and business units. Everyone owns a slice, but very few people own the end-to-end lifecycle of access. Change processes reward uptime and delivery, not the graceful retirement of privileges and connections. Architecture reviews focus on initial deployment, with little attention to how the shape of access will change as projects, teams, and vendors churn. In that environment, an IAB can assume that your network will age badly, gaining listings faster than it closes them.
Changing who owns access lifecycles is not just a process tweak, it is a leadership decision. When identity governance, third-party access management, and segmentation hygiene are treated as central measures of success, they start to compete with traditional metrics like time to delivery. When teams know that the half-life of access they create will be reviewed alongside their availability numbers, they design differently. Service accounts get bounded scopes by default. Vendor connections are time-boxed and revalidated. The organization starts to treat lingering paths as visible debt instead of invisible convenience. Over time, that reduces the pool of clean, durable footholds that brokers can bring to market.
On the technical side, leaders can push for patterns that make any single foothold short-lived and noisy. Privileged access can move towards just-in-time models, where roles are granted for specific tasks and revoked automatically when those tasks end. High-value systems can sit behind modern controls such as Zero Trust Network Access, ZTNA, rather than behind static VPN tunnels. Internal segmentation can separate identity infrastructure, critical business services, and commodity workloads in ways that force attackers to invest heavily in each hop. Authentication logs, session recordings for high-risk operations, and lateral movement detection all raise the operational risk of using purchased access because every step leaves a stronger trail.
There is also value in deliberate uncertainty. Deception systems, well-placed honeypots, and crafted fake credentials change the buyer's calculus. When an environment is known for traps, a broker cannot easily guarantee that a given path is safe. Rapid revocation of suspected accounts, aggressive cleanup of stale privileges, and well-practiced runbooks for shrinking or severing vendor connectivity transform the post-compromise landscape. A foothold that might have been stable for months becomes fragile. From the auction house perspective, that fragility shows up as failed campaigns and burned buyers, which lowers demand for similar listings in the future.
The heart of this story is value. Access brokers have taken the diffuse, messy idea of being compromised and turned it into a structured product that reflects the value others can extract from your environment. A listing compresses your architecture, your identity debt, and your governance habits into a few fields and a price. Once leaders internalize that view, they start to see design choices as levers on that price, rather than as isolated technical debates. A decision to leave a legacy VPN appliance in place, or to tolerate a flat merger segment for another year, stops being a minor technical compromise and becomes a choice to subsidize an external market.
That shift also changes the conversations you have with boards and executives. Instead of focusing only on the latest ransomware family or regulatory headline, you can describe how your environment would be marketed by an IAB today and how that description should change over the next 12 to 24 months. You can frame investment in identity governance, segmentation, and third-party access controls as a way to reduce your attractiveness as inventory, not just as another compliance line item. Certain questions become natural. Which access paths would a broker highlight? Which would quietly persist through routine cleanup? And which would force them to work too hard to be worth listing?
From here, the most useful moves are small but concrete. One working session might ask architecture, infrastructure, and security leaders to write the first 3 lines of a hypothetical access listing for your company, and then decide which attributes to attack first. Another might put merger integrations, vendor connections, and remote access platforms on a whiteboard and map where long-lived, broadly scoped privileges are likely to hide. Each of those exercises keeps the focus on depreciation, shrinking the durability, clarity, and reliability of footholds so that brokers struggle to turn them into stock.
Compromise will continue to happen, and auction houses will continue to exist. The goal is not to disappear from their world entirely, but to become bad business. When your identity and access patterns change quickly, your internal segmentation forces custom work, and your detection raises the odds of noisy failure, the cost of using purchased access goes up while the payoff window shrinks. Over time, your organization migrates from the category of easy, reliable stock to the category that serious buyers quietly skip. That does not show up in a single metric, but it shows up in the shape of incidents, the stories adversaries tell about you, and the absence of your environment from the informal shortlists that define an underground market.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.